4. When an avoidant leaves for someone else, the first instinct many people have is to turn inward with blame. They start asking, what did I do wrong? 4. Wasn't I good enough? But the truth is, in most cases, their decision had very little to do with you, and everything to do with their relationship with intimacy itself. Avoidants carry a deep-rooted fear of closeness, one that often goes back to early attachment experiences. For them, emotional connection doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels dangerous. 4. And when love starts to deepen, when the bond with you becomes more real and more demanding of vulnerability, that's when the alarm bells go off inside them. But think about this for a moment. When you opened your heart, you weren't just offering affection. You were offering depth, honesty, and emotional intimacy. 4. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that level of exposure can feel like standing naked under a spotlight. Their nervous system interprets closeness not as safety, but as a threat. So when they leave, especially when they run into the arms of someone new, 4. It's not because you didn't give them enough. It's because you gave them exactly what they were afraid of: real intimacy. Now, 4, here's where it gets complicated. An avoidant will often justify leaving by telling themselves a story, that the problem lies in the relationship, or that they'll be happier with someone different. But underneath those rationalizations, the core driver is avoidance itself. 4. They're not moving towards something, they're running away from something. They're running from the weight of being truly seen, from the responsibility of emotional reciprocity, from the vulnerability of saying, I need you. And so, leaving becomes their way of preserving the illusion of control. The new relationship, in many ways, is a reset button with someone else. They can keep things on the surface, avoid the depths, and experience a temporary sense of freedom. But that freedom is not real freedom. It's avoidance masquerading as liberation. And what you need to see clearly is this. Their leaving is not proof of your inadequacy, it is proof of their fear. This fear of intimacy is not random. It comes from a learned belief that closeness equals danger. Somewhere in their past, they absorbed the message that to rely on others is unsafe. That love is conditional, that connection leads to disappointment or even abandonment. So, when you tried to love them fully, their nervous system treated it like a threat, and their instinct was to retreat. That's not love failing, it's fear succeeding. And I want you to really hear this, nothing you could have done differently would have rewired that fear in them. Because that's not your job. You are not responsible for healing the wounds they refuse to face. Love is powerful, but love cannot override someone else's unwillingness to confront their shadows. When an avoidant leaves, it says more about their inner war than it does about your value. So instead of asking, why wasn't I enough? The better question is, why do they keep running from enoughness when it's right in front of them? That's the paradox of avoidance. They long for connection, yet they sabotage it the moment it gets too real. And when they leave, all they're doing is hitting pause on the inevitable. Because sooner or later, the same cycle will repeat with someone else. What this really means for you is that their departure is not a verdict on your worth, it's a reflection of their fear. And when you understand that, you stop personalizing their choices. You stop carrying the weight of their unresolved trauma, and you reclaim the truth that intimacy is not something to fear. It's something to celebrate, to lean into, to cherish. Because here's the bottom line. Avoidants leave not because you are too much, but because your love demanded a level of presence they weren't ready to give. And the most powerful thing you can do is not shrink yourself, not water down your love, but to stand tall in the knowing that what scared them away is the very thing that makes you extraordinary. And when you fully claim that truth, you no longer see their leaving as a loss, you see it as liberation. When an avoidant leaves for someone else, there's this powerful illusion at play, a sense that they've finally found freedom to the outside world. It can even look like they've upgraded, as if they've moved into something lighter, easier, more exciting. But what's really happening beneath the surface is not liberation, it's escape. The new relationship often feels fresh because it hasn't yet demanded the depth and accountability that real intimacy requires. It's a moving into a new house and mistaking the fresh paint smell for structural stability. The walls are the same, the foundation is the same. But for a while, it feels different. Avoidants crave this illusion of freedom because it temporarily silences the inner tension they feel when they're asked to show up fully. When they're with you and the bond deepens, they feel the weight of intimacy pressing in. Vulnerability becomes unavoidable. They know, on some level, that they can't keep hiding behind walls forever, and that realization terrifies them. So leaving gives them the chance to hit reset with someone new. 4. They can keep things on the surface. Lighthearted, fun, exciting. They can postpone the hard conversations, avoid the depth. 4. And maintain the feeling that they are in control. But here's the catch: that illusion never lasts. Because intimacy isn't about who you're with. 4. It's about what you bring into the relationship. Wherever they go, they carry themselves. The same patterns, the same fears, the same walls. And eventually, 4. The new partner will want more too. They'll want closeness, commitment, honesty. And the avoidant will feel the same suffocating fear all over again. 4. This cycle repeats until the avoidant finally chooses to confront the truth that freedom isn't about avoiding connection. 4. It's about finding the courage to embrace it. This is important for you to understand, because when someone leaves you for someone else, 4. It's easy to romanticize what they have now. You imagine they're happier, more fulfilled, more in love. But you have to remember, 4. What they're experiencing isn't intimacy, it's relief. Relief from pressure. Relief from vulnerability. Relief from having to confront their own fears. 4. And relief is temporary. It's like taking a painkiller for a broken bone. It dulls the ache for a while, but it doesn't heal the fracture. 4. The illusion of freedom also feeds into a deeper philosophical struggle. Most avoidants are terrified of being trapped. They equate intimacy with loss of autonomy, as if loving someone means surrendering their independence. So when they meet someone new, they convince themselves, this time I'll stay free. This time, 4. I won't feel trapped. But real freedom isn't the absence of commitment, it's the presence of choice. True autonomy comes from being able to choose intimacy. 4. To lean in without feeling controlled. And until they understand that, 4. Every new relationship will feel like a ticking clock counting down to the moment their fear resurfaces. Now here's where this becomes your turning point. 4. Recognizing this illusion frees you from comparing yourself to the new partner. You stop asking, what do they have that I don't? 4. Because you realize the new partner is not the answer. The avoidant is simply running the same pattern on a new stage. And when you see this clearly, 4. You begin to reclaim your power. You understand that you were never the problem. You weren't too much, and you weren't not enough. You were simply real, and reality is exactly what they weren't ready for. So instead of envying the illusion, trust in the truth. The person who left you in search of freedom will eventually discover that freedom without intimacy is just emptiness dressed up as independence. And while they chase the illusion, you have the opportunity to build something real. Something that doesn't need escape hatches. Something that doesn't collapse under the weight of love. Because here's the truth: the illusion of freedom is temporary, but the power of genuine connection is timeless. And the moment you understand that, their leaving stops being your loss, and it becomes your awakening. 4. One of the hardest truths to accept when an avoidant leaves for someone else is that what you're really seeing is not a reflection of your shortcomings, but a projection of theirs. Avoidants are experts at convincing themselves that the problem lies outside of them. They'll point to your intensity, 4. Your expectations, your neediness. They'll rationalize their departure by telling themselves they just weren't compatible with you, 4. Or that they'll find peace with someone simpler. But underneath that narrative is a deeper reality: they are running from themselves. 4. Every human being carries wounds. Some wounds come from childhood, moments when our needs weren't met, when we learned it wasn't safe to trust. 4. When love felt conditional or inconsistent. For the avoidant, those wounds run deep. Or they may have been the child who learned early on that closeness was overwhelming, or that showing too much emotion pushed people away. And so they built a strategy: stay self-reliant, keep intimacy at arm's length, protect yourself at all costs. That strategy worked when they were young, but in adulthood, 4. It sabotages every meaningful connection. So when you offered them real love, when you invited them into real closeness, it triggered those old wounds. 4. And instead of facing them, they projected. They looked at you and said, you're the problem. You're too much. You're the reason I feel suffocated. But what they were really saying is, I'm not ready to deal with the pain inside me. I'd rather blame you than face myself. 4. This projection is why avoidants so often believe that changing partners will fix everything. They convince themselves that if they find the right person, 4, they'll finally feel at ease. But the discomfort they feel isn't coming from the relationship. It's coming from their unhealed past. 4. And the cruel irony is that until they face that past, no partner will ever feel right. Every relationship will eventually stir the same insecurities. 4. The same fears, the same desperate need to escape. Now this is where it gets tricky for you. Because when someone projects their wounds onto you, 4, it's easy to internalize that story. It's easy to believe their leaving means you weren't enough. But what you have to remember is this: 4. Projection is a mirror of their state, not a measure of your value. Their inability to face themselves says nothing about your worth. It only reveals the depth of their unresolved pain. Think of it this way: imagine someone with a broken leg who refuses to acknowledge it. Every time they try to walk, they blame the ground for being uneven. They say, "This path is too rocky, this road is too hard." But the truth is, 4, the ground isn't the problem, the injury is. And unless they stop, admit they're hurt, and do the work of healing, every road will feel impossible. That's exactly what happens with avoidance. They keep blaming the relationship when in reality, it's the wound inside them that needs attention. 4, and here's the empowering shift for you. You are not responsible for healing what they refuse to confront. You can offer love, you can offer stability, you can even offer grace, but you cannot walk into someone else's past and fix it for them. That's their work, and if they choose not to do it, for then leaving for someone else is simply another way of postponing the inevitable confrontation with themselves. So instead of carrying their projections as truth, 4, release them. Understand that when they said, "You're too much," what they really meant was, "I can't handle intimacy." When they said, "You expect too much," 4, what they really meant was, "I'm unwilling to face what connection requires of me." Their words were never about you. They were about their war within. 4. And the moment you grasp that, you stop fighting for their approval and start reclaiming your peace. Because in the end, their leaving is not a verdict on your worth. 4, it's a mirror of their fear. And that mirror doesn't belong to you. The most powerful choice you can make is to set it down, walk away, and remember, 4, their projections may distort the truth, but they can never erase it. When an avoidant leaves for someone else, it's natural to see it as a personal rejection. It cuts deep because you've invested your love, your energy, and your vulnerability into the relationship, only to watch them walk away. 4. But if you step back and look at the bigger picture, you realize something essential: their departure is not about your inadequacy. 4, it's about their inability to handle intimacy. 4. And what that really means for you is an opportunity, an opening to redefine what love should look like in your life, and what you truly deserve moving forward. 4. You see, love is not just about chemistry or attraction. It's about two people who are willing to meet each other fully, without walls, without masks, 4, without running at the first sign of discomfort. And when one person refuses to show up in that way, the foundation can never be solid, no matter how much you give, no matter how patient you are, no matter how much you hope they'll change. Their leaving exposes the truth you may not have wanted to face. For love cannot thrive when only one person is doing the emotional heavy lifting. That realization can feel devastating at first, but it's also liberating, because it gives you clarity. It shows you where the boundaries are. For it shows you that you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking for what love actually requires: emotional presence, reciprocity, growth. 4. When an avoidant leaves, they're not just abandoning you, they're abandoning those very principles. And that's not a reflection of your worth. 4. It's a reflection of their fear. Now here's the deeper shift. Instead of seeing their departure as a failure, you can choose to see it as a filter. 4. Their leaving filtered them out of your life so you could make space for someone who is ready. Someone who doesn't flinch at intimacy. Someone who sees your depth, 4, not as pressure but as a gift. And this isn't just about romantic relationships. It's about how you approach every connection in your life. When you stop personalizing the choices of avoidance, you stop settling for half-present love in any form. You start valuing relationships that are mutual, honest, 4, and alive. There's also something profoundly strengthening about surviving this kind of loss. 4. Because when you realize that someone can walk away and you still stand, you still breathe, 4, you still love, that's when you discover the resilience you didn't know you had. Avoidants run from vulnerability. But when you face the pain of their leaving and still choose to keep your heart open, you're embodying the very courage they couldn't find. You're proving to yourself that love is not weakness, it's strength. And here's the part that matters most: you don't have to carry their story anymore. 4. You don't have to define yourself through the lens of someone who couldn't meet you where you were. Their inability to stay says nothing about your capacity to love. It only highlights the fact that you were willing to give what they could not. 4. And that willingness, that open-heartedness, is your greatest power. So what does it really mean when an avoidant leaves for someone else? 4. It means you've been released from the cycle of trying to heal someone who isn't ready to be healed. 4. It means you now have the chance to redirect your love toward someone who will not run from it, but rise to meet it. It means you can stop questioning your worth and start embracing the truth: you were never too much. You were exactly enough. 4. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this: their leaving was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of your freedom.